Hey, everybody. I am here with my friend Isaac, my teammate, my co mischief maker on the Fresh Expressions US team. And I can't wait for him to get to share with you what is near and dear to both of our hearts in so many ways, but what God has led him to in these last number of years in the dinner church movement, table centered church, and engaging our communities, building relationships, all those beautiful things that God's at work doing. So, Isaac, why don't you share, introduce yourself, how you like to be introduced, share a little bit about your context?
All right. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Honored to be able to do this. My name is Isaac Olivarez. Here in Denver, Colorado. My wife Jamie and I. This year we'll have 20 years married, and we have been on this ministry journey since 2004. And with the context that we're in right now, we started in 2011. Really, we wanted to plant a church in the inner city for the marginalized, and that's kind of what we held on to dearly. That was kind of what guided us. And so we have been ministering downtown in a neighborhood called Five Points in Denver since 2011, really just trying to meet needs that we were able to identify through doing a series of outreaches. We just wanted to meet people, get to know them, get to know their stories, and then, of course, meet some practical needs. And the idea from the beginning was to bring a church. However, what we had in our minds at that time was really nothing like what we're doing today. And so that was an interesting journey for sure. But we have been, doing dinner church since 2013. And it was something that we kind of fell into with the way that we had started organizing outreaches, and then it was kind of like a funnel, really. We wanted to bring people from doing, from street outreaches into a gathering centered around food, so that we could introduce people to or invite people to church on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the original plan, and God had other plans.
So good. I was sharing before we started, before I hit record, that I think I heard Isaac speak for the first time at one of our national gatherings, and kind of sharing how God really messed up his plans and what he thought his church was going to look like, and kind of invited him into something new, and your obedience and your ability to kind of adapt along the way, whatever that plan was, is something that I think we can all take some notes from. So I guess just to give a little bit of context, like, you had more or less kind of a traditional church plant situation, and then it became something very different.
That's right. Yeah, and it's interesting now that I look back. I mean, I was really wary from the very beginning about
Mm-hmm.
how we were going to do this church. And that's because I had kind of imported all these ideas of what a church was supposed to look like, how it was supposed to be led. And I kind of felt, gosh, I guess I can say insecure and about how I was going to lead that way, because it never came naturally to me. And but I just really, again, we felt so confident in knowing that God had called us to do this, that we figured he would figure it out for us. He would
Yeah.
lead the way. He would do what only he can do. Um, and yeah, it was supposed to be a traditional, way of doing church, but and as Verlin Fosner says often, we had no idea of the sociology that goes into doing church this way, and that was a huge piece of it that fortunately we learned pretty quickly. So.
Yeah. So say a little bit more about that, because you were in a very urban context. And so, you coming in there with more of a traditional mindset around what church looked like, versus the people that you were kind of doing these outreach things with, and how that really, I would have to venture to guess that it began to look a little bit more like a kingdom banquet table than maybe it did before.
Right, right. Again, going back to that sociology piece, we people responded very well to the outreaches. They were very thankful. We um, I just have always felt so comfortable being in, in the streets, ministering to people and doing street ministry. And I tell people from the beginning, I mean, I don't have that experience growing up. I'm a pastor's kid, and yet I felt so comfortable just reaching out to folks. And so I think as a consequence, our volunteers and those that would come and join in, we just made people feel really comfortable. So then they were very, excited to come to these meals that we set up, because it was like bringing them one step further in, and we had established some rapport and some credibility. Um, so that was great. And then we just hit this roadblock when it came to people coming on Sunday morning for church. And, we were wondering, how is this, happening? Because everyone is just responding so wonderfully, yet it's not translating. And so, we figured that these people are living in a different rhythm of
Mm.
their week, not even just spiritually. Again,
Yeah.
sociologically, they're just the rhythms of their week look totally different. And so that's what we were up against. And so we found out that the Thursday. So we set up the meals on Thursday nights, and Thursday nights were just taking off, and conversations were happening. We just would feel fulfilled every week after these meals. Then Friday morning would hit, and we would feel this cloud looming over us, because we knew, like, well, we hope that people come on Sunday now, and we've been inviting and
Uh,
outreaching, and it wasn't happening. And I guess we just felt like we were already having church on Thursdays. That's kind of the feeling we started to get. And right around that time is when we started looking into and discovering we had become a dinner church. So I can't take the credit for saying, hey, we're going to launch the dinner church in inner city Denver. It was just, we fell into it, and the Holy Spirit led us there. And that sociological piece, not only did it free us when we acknowledged that we had become a dinner church, I think the people that we were ministering to, there was just like this feeling of just relenting to what the Spirit was doing. And it wasn't a letdown, but it was just like recognizing what the Spirit had led us to. And so from that point on, we just stopped having Sunday gatherings, and we just took off with our Thursday dinners. And that sociological piece became a further point of discovery, to then say, okay, what's leading into these different rhythms? How are they?
wow.
How is it a barrier to the gospel? And then how can we use it then as a launching point to go deeper in relationship, to show how the gospel is still relevant in their lives? And then, of course, as we have found out since then, well, it is not an inhibitor in any way. In fact, especially the Gospel of Luke is laden with these
Yeah.
examples of Jesus just sharing the good news around tables. And so
Mhm.
what an amazing discovery that's been. And it's just, it's made the last several years fly by. I can tell you that.
I bet the hospitality of God come to life
Right.
in this time and age. Some of the things that you said I think are really poignant. And I want to highlight them. I mean, you talked about the rhythms of the lives of the people that you were seeking to build relationships with, and how that became really the impetus for this kind of moving into what it is now. And that paying attention, right? That attentiveness, that listening that we talk about so much in Fresh Expressions. And it's not just like, let's listen and then go do the thing, but it's like we listen all along the way, and we adapt and adjust accordingly, based on what we're hearing and what we're being attentive to.
Mhm.
And then even when you had the revelation, it was funny. When you were describing how you were doing the thing on Thursday, and then Sunday's coming, and you're like, oh, well, wait a second. It's like, wait, church is already happening, and it's on Thursday. We can call that church.
Right.
It's really interesting how we get so hung up in our mindset about what church is and what church isn't, and that we're so tied to this whole Sunday morning idea of church. But then
Right.
also in your process of listening, once you finally kind of started to let go, to be even more curious,
Mhm.
and in that listening and understanding those rhythms that were really different, right? and trying to understand why they were different and what did that mean and what were the implications of that. And then, wow, I mean, you use the word barriers to the gospel.
Mhm.
So say a little bit about your curiosity and kind of where you are with that today. And what kind of was uncovered as you became more curious and saw what that was all about.
I think in more than one way, it coincided with my personal faith journey.
Mm,
I, again, being, raised in church, I the, the reason why we wanted to bring a church to the inner city in the first place was because I've always just had this belief that if the gospel is real, and not coming from a place of doubt, but
right.
but saying, okay, if the gospel is real and it's for everyone and it's valid for everyone, then it's got to be relevant for everyone in every circumstance. And of course, we know that that's true. But then I had this thought. I'm like, well, why are we not seeing the homeless in our churches? I mean,
Mm,
why? What is keeping them out? Certainly there are some churches, unfortunately, that are not welcoming.
yeah.
Um, but there are many pastor friends that I'm sure we can all think of that think, man, our doors are wide open for anyone. But there are things that keep people away, and those are sociological reasons. One of the things that I've discovered is that the gospel is very practical. I mean, there are practical reasons for and big, but they're very consequential, but they're very practical, and those can keep people out of our churches. And so, for me, it was a personal quest as well.
Mm,
To see, like, well, we should not have to augment the gospel to make it relevant for the
mm,
marginalized.
amen.
And when we look at, again, book of Luke, Jesus says in chapter 4, like, I have come to bring freedom for the oppressed, to bring recovery of sight for the blind. Like,
Mhm,
this is
mhm.
why I came. And so it's just being convinced. Well, then we see from chapter 4 on, I mean, he's just eating and drinking with sinners and tax collectors and prostitutes, and
Yeah.
this is why he came. And so, again, it was a personal faith journey, because I'm just thinking that there has to be a way for us to be able to reach people with the gospel in an effective way. And then, me personally, there has to be a way where I can lead confidently within who I am and the way God has gifted me. And it just, again, they just seem to mesh when I guess that nexus was dinner church for us.
Yeah.
And um, so that's kind of how that came about. And again, I keep referring to the book of Luke, because key to that whole journey for me was that curiosity of just, wow, like, Jesus is at a table again. He was invited to a table again. He invited himself to Zacchaeus's table. And so it's just everywhere. And I guess for me, the lesson was, to really see the gospel, or to see the Bible, to read it on its own terms,
Yeah.
and to let it, speak to our time, but to read it on its own terms, so that we
Mm,
can have that freedom, right? That freedom to
yeah.
to to be flexible in how we preach the gospel. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean the table is such a place of coming together. I think it can be a place where all of those socioeconomic dividing lines, I think that are across our society, are eliminated to some degree when you're able to sit at a table and share a meal. And we all have to eat,
Right.
and there's some common ground to be found there for sure. But it also sounds like not only did you go on this quest, this journey to get to build relationships and understand better who was sitting at the table with you, and what maybe some of the barriers in their own journeys were, but you were changed as a result. There were implications not only for other people that were on the journey with you, but for you as well, which was a humbling statement for a pastor to make, really, because you're the pro. Like, you should know this stuff, right? But I know, Isaac. I've said it in over the course of my own ministry that I feel like I'm the disciple that's made in the going, but you got to actually go. Yeah, you actually have to go. So,
Yes, yes.
so what have you seen, I guess, in other people's lives as they've kind of been invited into this adventure with you, and what are the implications for the church moving forward, church with a capital C, and for discipleship and what it means to be a follower of Jesus?
I guess one of the first things that jumps into my mind when you ask that question is the word shock. I think a lot of people are shocked when they come to our dinner church because they're shocked at what they see. They're shocked at what they hear. Of course, I mean, there have been many times in our context where there have been, we'll just say, instances of potential violence or potential just things that happen in the course of doing inner city ministry.
Yeah.
And so I think people might be shocked initially just to be in that type of an environment, and then to put air quotes around that, that's a church environment, right? So there's that level of shock. But
Well,
then
our friend says, our friend Verlin says you need street fighting Jesus, and I'll just testify that you need street fighting Jesus in the suburban community dinners and dinner churches too, because
that's so true. That's so true.
yeah,
But I think the other side of that is it's a spiritual shock. I think sometimes people are or surprised. I think people are surprised at how strong and poignant and real the presence of Jesus is in those contexts. And I think that, like, again, going back to the Gospels where, Jesus is among the poor. He's among the hurting. He desires to be there. And when we come together, and we're sharing meals at the table, and not just like I tell our folks, I say it's great that you're here. Welcome. We love you. We're happy to see you. It's great to enjoy a meal among friends. But what really makes it special is that the presence of Jesus is here. And so when we invite him in and we're aware that we're doing this, we're having a big communion meal is what we're doing.
yeah, yeah,
And so Jesus, it's like the early church in Acts, they expected his presence to be there. They weren't hoping. I mean, they expected Jesus to be there because in the Last Supper, Jesus said, "Do this in remembrance of me." He desires to be with us. So people that maybe they're volunteering with a church group. We've had all kinds of church, different types of groups volunteer, but especially maybe some of our suburban church groups that will volunteer. This is kind of their first exposure to this kind of an environment. And so they're surprised to feel the presence of Jesus in a very, I guess at times, uncouth place. If that's grammatically correct, which it doesn't feel like it is, but like
unlikely,
in a very unlikely place. And so, but, you'll see some things, you'll hear some language. I mean, in the summertime, sometimes people are dressed very scantily clad. I mean, it's like there's just things in our church that you're just like, whoa.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow. And yet the presence of Jesus is so real. And so, again, I guess what I was getting at with that is that I think it helps us maybe redefine, or not redefine. Well, maybe in our minds we need to, but properly define what reverence is. I think reverence too many times in churches has become this euphemism for being quiet and even somber, and certainly there are times for that. Absolutely. But I think at times reverence sounds like a lot of laughter and maybe some disagreements, or maybe just again, like I said, some colorful language as you're bringing people in as they are. But yet you're seeing with your physical eyes and your spiritual eyes darkness and light clashing. And the gospel, I think of Romans 5, where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more.
Yes.
Where it's just, you are just seeing it play out. And to me, that's reverence, because you are taking the gospel at face value. You are trusting in the word of God to do what it promises to do. I don't know of any other way we can more revere the gospel than that.
Yeah, so good. And all that said, what does this? How does this change the church? And I think that you began this far before the beginning of the pandemic, I know, many people that planted dinner churches or table gatherings in different communities before the pandemic. Um, and then obviously the pandemic has had an impact. You talk to people, you coach people all over the continent that are starting dinner churches or maybe have been, practitioners of this type of church for some time now. What are you seeing as a result of the pandemic? How has that impacted these table gatherings? I know we've had to pivot and adapt a lot.
That's for sure. Um, you know, I think a lot of things have been exposed. I think a lot
Mhm.
of things have been revealed. Um, One of the things that I think has really come to the surface is that people, for those that are responding, they're done with anonymous Christianity. I think
Mm,
that people want to be known and seen and loved, and a lot of times, in maybe perhaps some larger churches, it's all too easy to just be an anonymous attender, an anonymous Christian. And there are times, I think there were seasons when that was maybe preferred, where it's like, I just want to go and attend and listen to an awesome, worship service and a sermon, and then I want to check out. And I think loneliness has been just really
yeah.
exposed, and I think people just want to be known by people. And I think that has been such a coup for the dinner church movement,
Mhm.
because um, obviously the pandemic has changed the way we do everything. And
Yeah.
so that's been a big shift, I believe. And again, not that other ways of doing church are inauthentic, but I think that
Right.
people are just craving an authenticity in their worship experiences. um, I think that even just ecumenically, I think there are just along the spectrum, from maybe Pentecostal on one side to just high church, or order on the other side. People want to maybe delve a little bit more toward the middle of the spectrum and see, I wonder how they do church, or I wonder how they do church. And I think dinner church allows you to just blend different things according to your
Mm.
context and what you need. And so people are just open. I think that loneliness has made people open, and our context is an inner city urban context, but there are way more dinner churches happening in rural areas and in suburban areas. So
Yeah.
it's not just tied down to one way of doing church. It's not just a way of doing church for the homeless, like ours
Mhm.
is. And so it's very flexible. And I think that that's something that resonates, I think, with people. And so authenticity, I think, to boil it down, would be the biggest thing.
Yeah, a lot of everything was stripped away in a sense, right? All the things that are that kept us busy or running from one thing to another, or stole our attention or whatever. When everything was kind of stripped away, there became a craving for that authenticity. And to your point, relationship, right? Because there was so much isolation, and I think that made it even more prevalent. And hungry people, right? I mean, a lot of the impacts of the pandemic, I think, really mobilized churches and communities to make sure that those needs were being met, and potentially some things that were started as a result of the pandemic became a bridge or a foundational possibility for new communities to emerge around tables. So
Right.
um, yeah, I don't ever want to diminish the pain and the loss and everything else that came with the pandemic, but there have been, as was said in another conversation, I have many silver linings as well.
Right. That's correct.
So I know that you do coach other leaders all over the country around dinner church or starting community dinners. Um, what are three things, I think that I would be curious what you would say? What are three things that you would encourage folks that are thinking about starting a table centered gathering to do? What would be those three things? And then what are kind of your three no nos that you would say don't do that?
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. The first thing is be yourself, be you. I struggled for far too long with trying to fit into a different, or a certain mold of leadership that I just think didn't need to happen. And that might have been a personal thing for me, but I think a lot of times in a lot of, you know, pastors and planters that I've talked to, there is this certain pressure, whether it's from your sending agency, your denomination, or family and friends, or supporters, whatever it may be, to to deliver a product in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Be yourself. Be yourself. Lead in the confidence that God has called you. Certainly, do things to be better and to learn and grow, of course. But be yourself. The second thing would be know your neighbors. Like get to know everyone in your neighborhood, not a specific demographic within a neighborhood. I have heard far too many church planting plans that involve a certain segment of a neighborhood or
Yeah.
expanded area, as if it's like a business plan. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's probably not the best approach when we think about planting a church or leading ministries. Get to know all of your neighbors. And then the third thing would be relax. I put relax because one thing I love about dinner church is that it provides an amazing context to be both formal at times and just casual at times. I'm a very casual leader myself, and so that works very well for me. But be flexible. I
Mm-hmm.
think that you have to be flexible. Like there is no way we would have survived if we had insisted on doing church the way we went and initially wanted to do it.
Yeah.
There's no way. And you have to be flexible. And the only thing that matters is it's the message, it's the gospel, it's the relationships. It's not the way in which you do it or the way that you think. I mean, it's acknowledging, I guess, at some level that, that we're so limited.
Yeah.
And by God's grace, He chooses to use us. And so be flexible. The three things that I would warn against, and I'll kind of put them this way. If you want to struggle, you can do it this way. You can pigeonhole your ideas. You can be inflexible. If you want to struggle, you will pigeonhole your ideas. The second thing you'll do is you will be rushed. You'll rush through the process. You won't let things happen organically. When I think of dinner church, I think of organic. I think of things happening from the bottom up, very authentically and over time. You're
Mm-hmm.
journeying with people. And what a better way to do that than to journey with people. And then you let the circumstances of your life, of their life, of life in your city, your neighborhood, your suburb, your whatever it may be, your county, if you're in a rural area, you let those natural circumstances that are going to arise provide the backdrop, the context for how you're going to serve and meet needs. And you can't rush that process.
Yeah.
The third thing would be, if you want to struggle, love or be overly obsessed with metrics. Um, uh, Certainly, there are things we want to do to keep track of how we're doing. Um, uh, but I think again that kind of just is dovetails from the second thing, is just you can't rush it, and if you are rushed because you want to provide a certain metric, certain proofs that you're growing or that things are happening, you're going to be rushed, and then you're always going to be on an up and down scale week after week or month after month or year after year.
Yeah.
That's just not the way ministry should be.
Right.
Again, yes, we strive, we work hard. And I think that when we talk to pastors and leaders in general, we don't have to worry about that because we're already all geared towards
Mm-hmm.
working too much
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and trying too hard. So I guess it's an invitation to just relax a bit, and again, like enjoying that journey, because the hard work is going to come. Unfortunately, the hard times, they're going to come, and if we are always burnt out when we really need the extra energy, we're not going to have it.
Yeah.
And so, but with the metrics, to me, I just, again, this might be just coming from our own context, maybe specifically, but I feel like our people would really be, I don't know, that would really turn people off. Uh,
Yeah.
if there's any semblance of, oh, you're using us to, I mean, and I've been accused by people. I mean, they may not come often, and they might be on drugs as they're telling me this, but they're saying, you just want money, or I remember you were doing a fundraiser for this, and it probably all went to your pocket, and but we just want to make sure that the way that we're doing ministry is not giving anyone the feeling that they're a means to an end.
Oh, that's so good. Like, they're people, they're not projects, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So
That's good. No, I mean, I think all of the things that you just listed, your three words of encouragement and your three no-nos, I think they're translatable, they're transferable to any pastor in any form of ministry. As far as what you've shared, I think they're really, really significant, and I thank you for that. Where are you finding hope right now? What does hope look like where you're sitting in your context?
I always find hope in people's stories. I think just going back to with everything that's happened in the pandemic, the uncertainty of the world, I find hope in the smallest things. I just think that when we look at the fabric of life and ministry, we tend to look at the big things, and I think that Jesus, again, his example is what encourages me. We look back to the very small, short conversations he would have with people, and he gave them hope, even if it was a word or two. I mean, that to me has to be the basis for what gives us hope in these uncertain times. It's just the little things. And again, I think that those are sometimes they can, maybe in my own personality, that's what Jesus knows I need, but we just tend to look at what can I do that's great for God and it's I think it's deeper than that. I think that we need to find hope in seeing people's journeys, growing, and seeing them respond to Jesus. And so I'm finding hope in like on that side, people responding to authentic ways of doing church, and then on leaders, with leaders, I'm responding, or I'm excited to see people responding to or being open to adding dinner churches to their menus.
Yeah, good.
Pun intended, but like just to the things that they're offering to their community.
Yeah.
I'm getting emails and calls, and people are just saying, hey, like, we've been doing a food bank. How can we turn this into a dinner church? I'm like,
So good. Yeah.
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 So I get
Yeah.
excited that people are open now, whereas before, maybe not so much.
Right, right. That's so good. I think one thing that I've heard kind of you say and refrain throughout our conversation is really two things. The whole idea of metrics, or what things look like maybe on the outside, or traditional metrics, does not tell the story, and that there is so much more to the significance of the depth that's happening in the relationships and the life change and the transformation, not only in the people that we're seeking to build relationships with, but in ourselves as well, right? And that's just God's economy. It doesn't make sense, but it's a beautiful thing. And that, I'm reminded that Paul, the Apostle Paul, did not plant churches. He planted the gospel wherever he was, and that the church just kind of grew, the community of faith kind of grew up around it. And really, I think that's really indicative of what this whole movement is about in regards to dinner churches and table gatherings and community dinners. I'm just excited about what the future looks like with the church, and how this is going to continue to impact our churches as people lean in, as people see the opportunities that maybe came to light over these last 2 years in ways that they had never come to light before. And in so many ways, you could say everything old is new again, right? We're not doing anything new and shiny. This is how the church was birthed in the first century, and grew exponentially.
Right.
And there's an invitation for us there in this new era that we're all getting to be a part of.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Well, is there any word of encouragement that you would leave folks with as we close out our conversation, Isaac?
I would just quickly say that we talked about the significance that we find in the depth of relationships, and
Yeah.
Not to overlook the significance of the meal itself. That's not the meal in and of itself is not a means to a relationship or a means to the gospel. It's foundational to
Mm,
the gospel. And take pride in the meals that you serve, and make some good food. And um, I think of Jesus, walking on the road to Emmaus with the two disciples after his resurrection,
yes.
and he's talking like he doesn't know what's been going on. They're like, "Are you crazy? Where have you been?" And they don't seem to know the scriptures as he's sharing. And Luke makes it very clear that it wasn't until they shared a meal together that their
That's
eyes
right.
were opened. There's significance in the meal in and of itself, and I'm
Mhm.
not talking wacko, transubstantiation or anything that happens crazily with the meal in and of
Mhm.
itself. But I think that, again, it helps us when we enjoy a meal together. It helps us slow down, and it
Mm.
helps us see things that Jesus wants us to see. And I think that's what's very special about dinner church.
Yeah, amen. Thank you. Thank you so much, Isaac. I know we have lots more to talk about, and we're excited to see folks at the national gathering. I am. Look forward
Absolutely.
to that coming up real soon. Well, everybody have a great, great day, and we look forward to meeting you in person or online sometime real soon.